What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Questions You Never Thought to Ask, the Whitewater Kayaking podcast. This week is an interesting and thought-provoking episode I think you're really going to enjoy, but just before we get started, I want to give a big shout-out to the people who support this podcast on Patreon. Patreon is a crowdfunding platform where you can chip in a couple of dollars every month to help keep this podcast running. You'll also get the added benefit of hearing it before it comes out on general release, so it's like a little extra perk, and you get the warm, glowy feeling of knowing that you did something to keep this podcast going, because without the people who support right now, it probably would not be going. So really appreciate those people. If you're interested in becoming one of those people, one of those amazing contributors, go check out patreon.com/Seth Ashworth, and yeah, you can support it on there. All right, enough for that. Let's get to the podcast. So, on this week's podcast, the cool thing about having a podcast that's like started by accident is I don't really have to talk about anything in particular or anything that I want. And anytime a subject comes up that I think, oh, I'm kind of interested about that, I can look into it more. And then, if it's interesting to me, maybe someone else is interested by it. And so I can pursue a podcast based pretty much, on whatever I want, which is the nice thing about having your own podcast. And a few weeks ago, I was talking with some friends of mine, and I was just, kind of trucking along, listening along, and one of my friends was talking about how they've been nervous to run this particular rapid, and it struck me as interesting that they felt this, like, fear almost, not just a rapid they had run many times before, but a rapid I know they are very capable of running, and it seemed like they had got into this kind of spiral of their fears had gotten out of sync with each other, that their fear level and their ability level didn't match up anymore. And it got me thinking, what does it happen, or like what can we do about that? Or because this is a fairly common thing, I've seen other friends experience the same thing. Like, why do your fear management skills and your ability skills get out of alignment? And that got me thinking to an Instagram post I had seen a few months ago from the one and only Mr. Ben Ma, when he was doing this really great Q&A about a lot of kayaking things. But anyway, this fear management topic came up. So I was like, hey, Benny, I'm pretty sure I saw this great infographic from you on Instagram about fear management. Can we talk about it? And so today on the podcast, I am joined by the one and only Benny fucking Ma. Benny, welcome back to the podcast.
You.
Benny, for people who haven't seen your infographic, it was like an Instagram story picture about fear management, and it had a bunch of these different really interesting points on about how you deal with fear. And it's pretty much, I've summarized it to like 5 points. I wonder if we could run through the 5 points that I summarized, and then if you wanted to talk and expand on how you got to that, how you would manage to winnow down your like whole brain thought of fear management into this one Instagram picture, basically. Because I thought it was very interesting, but also it was like a lot of information all in one go, and I'm sure it took you a long time and a lot of experience to get there, and I was hoping we could break through some of the things in that. So I pretty much got it down to, you said, breathing to slow your heart rate. Why are you scared specifically? Question mark. Are you pushing your limit? And if so, by how much? What are the actual risks? Which I thought was an interesting way to word that. And are you going to be stoked because it was fun, or because you didn't fuck up? And if you would like to take it away at any of those points, how you came to have that opinion, and go from there, that'd be awesome.
Yes, Seth. Thank you. I think I'm curious about what got you thinking about this, what rapid, what river, with who, and what their experience was, because something I've been thinking about, I think kind of over the past week and today, was I was thinking of how you approach your edge, and then what, if you say your edge, it could be a fear threshold, it could be a point you haven't passed in the technicality, size, or difficulty of a rapid, or whatever. not sport related, you can understand what I mean by that. And then as I'm aging a lot, I feel like unless I'm actively approaching and moving my edge, it's moving towards me. And I can certainly see that in other people. And how people manage that differently is cool too, because some people don't like it. Some people observe it happening and just move along quite happily. And for other people, it could be a huge change and kind of attack their ego. So I've been thinking about that, and I started thinking about the edge instead of like a bubble shrinking, which would probably go to show that my ego gets hurt by that, and I don't manage it super well. And if you're thinking that much about fear and your edge, then I know that because I'm having these thoughts that I have to be careful of my ego being so potent in a certain situation that I might do something because of my ego. Which, when I ran the Portage Rapid on the Baker and swam, and about a week or maybe a week and a half before that, I was scouting it, and I had this whole amazing moment where I was standing there looking at it, and I was like, I do not want to kayak through this rapid, but this is what I do. Like, my identity, I feel cooler because I run big, high volume stuff. And I was looking at it, I was like, it's been run higher than this. It's been run at this level. I am not interested even a little bit. And I accepted it, and I portaged it every time, and I moved on, and I had this thing. I think my threshold just changed. And then we got back a week later, and the water was lower, and it just looked different, and I was comfortable, and I ran it. And swim or no swim, regardless, it was just part of that rapid.
I think it's interesting, something you just brought up there that's like kind of an expounding thing on all these like key points that you had brought up, is how much our identity is like linked to when we take risks. And maybe not necessarily that's the right way to phrase it, but like maybe we could say our identity for a kayaker is, for like you and I, is like, it's easy for it to accidentally just get glued into kayaking and what you're kayaking and pushing as hard as you can all the time. And at some point, whether you want to or not, that bubble is changing shape.
Yeah. And what I personally have to work at, and I struggle with, is I can go pretty quickly around in my own head, and I can create potential realities and give them a lot of strength over me. So for example, if I go to Site Z and I don't run it, and I don't have a reason, like a natural reason, it gets a bit too high. That's pretty much the only reason. There's a level that I've run it at, and then there's a level I've seen it where it's the exact same scenario as the first time I would have ever run it, where I can see a line, but I don't know if it would work. And that really calls to me. But if I go there and I don't run it when it's runnable, my thoughts, and this would tie into, like, why are you running it? Like, what is the feeling at the bottom that you're looking for? And if it's good to go and I don't run it, then that creates a lot of thoughts in my head about why I didn't run it, if I'm going to run it again. If I don't run it this day, when I know I can and I know I have and I know all these things, in 2 days or in 2 years when I'm back, will that decision affect me? Will that decision have more weight behind it? And that is a fun thing for me to think about. And there's a certain point where I like trying to be really aware of my ego when I'm scouting whitewater, because it can be used for good or evil. You can use it as an encouragement to put your skills through something that you're confident they can deliver you safely to the bottom of a piece of gradient and whatever craft you're doing that with, or because of your ego, you might put yourself in a situation where you weren't quite ready for, either mentally, physically, or experientially. So I don't think there's anything wrong with using the ego to boost yourself into something, but then again, you don't want to get to the bottom of a rapid and just think, oh, like, I'm so stoked, I'm okay, moving downstream. Like, that to me would be a sign that you weren't 100% sure that you had it. And it should be about testing your skills and your mindset versus, like, the gradient's going to work one way or another. Like, you're going to get to the bottom of most things.
It's such a dichotomy, isn't it? That, like, ego, like, you kind of can't live with it, but you can't live without it either. And it's interesting that you say that it's like, oh yeah, you can use it positively as well. Because I think a lot of people, they hear that word ego and they're like, immediate negative connotation. But it's interesting to hear you kind of add that point that you almost need it. You need that part of your brain to be like, yo, you got this, like, let's go. Put your spray deck on.
Yeah, because the ego can be a part of my decision making, or it can be like the ego is either aligned with me and what I see, or my ego can sometimes almost be telling me things, not working with me, but being like, why aren't you doing this? Like, what are you doing? A cool example of a iconic rapid would be the Minas Rapids, because they do not fall into the river trip. If you want to run them, you have to go upstream to get to them. So it's a neat way. Say you're running the middle channel of the Ottawa River, you know you're going to get to Garvin's, and you know you're either going to run it or walk around it. When you run the Zambezi, you may never even go up to see the Minas Rapids. Like, it's the decision starts a long way away, which is cool because it requires a lot of effort. That's a cool egotistical rapid to run.
So when you get to the end of a rapid, to kind of like round this point off, you are looking for, like, are you looking to feel, you're not looking obviously for that feeling like, oh boy, I'm glad I didn't mess that up, or are you? Or, like, to kind of compound what we're saying here, is like, how are you going to feel at the end? It, like, obviously factors into, like, your decision making process at the start. That's kind of what we've been talking about here. And it's like, should you, what's the best way to express this? I'm struggling with my words right now. When you're scouting a rapid, should you be 100% on one or the other? Like, should you stand at the top and you think, I'm going to be stoked when I'm at the end of that because I'm going to style this greasy line? Or when you're looking at it from the top and you're looking at it like, I'm going to be stoked at the end because I won't have eaten shit into that wall or whatever. But should you stand there at the top and be like, okay, I know I'm going to come out with one expectation or the other? Or, like, kind of to take you back in time, like, are you going to be, like, when you're looking, what are you looking for to feel?
You're, depending on what you're running, like, all of my examples are whatever, like, actual, like, class 5, like, if at the spectrum. So you can be hitting these thresholds in actual class 3 whitewater, but you need to understand that, and then the realistic interpretation of risk is very important. So when the risk is death or unknown shitty circumstances, or you don't know what you are potentially putting your friends through to help, like, if it's going to spiral out of your control, like, if you're going to lose your independence, you need to be aware of that. What I said, and that was very specific, I was talking to someone at the North Fork, and they didn't want to run Jake's. and they were going to be racing in it. And I said, well, then don't run it. Like, why don't you want to run it? And if you run it and it goes well, because it will, because of who you are and how good you are in kayaking, what are you expecting to feel? And if you don't know that you're just going to put yourself into the boat and into the current and execute to your skill level, which is reasonably expected, and be happy about that, then don't do it. If you think you're just going to be like, I did it, I'm not someone who didn't do it, I'm not someone who is meant to be racing in 2 days or in 1 day, and I haven't practiced yet, and that's going to bother me, like just walk away and be happy with that, especially if you know you can do it and you know you will be doing it later. So that was pretty specific. If you stand at the top of a rapid, you can see all of it and your first emotions are of excitement, that's going to change how you scout the rapid. If you look at it and you think, oh shit, and you just see all these places where you don't want to go, but you still really want to give it a good scout, or you already know you're going to run it, that should just determine the care of your scout and the time you take to do it. And I'd like to start at the bottom. I don't always think like this, but if I'm talking to someone about it, I'm like, okay, you're like in that eddy, you just high-fived, now work your way up backwards. What happened to get you to that?
Yeah, I think scouting rapids from the bottom up is the only logical way, and I don't know why not everyone seems to be on that program. And I've encountered plenty of people in my travel that like will start scouting a rapid at the top, and I'm like, you can't even see the bottom. Like, what? This might be all a waste of time if like we go around the corner and there's a big tree there. Like,
yeah,
what are you doing? And it's weird to me that like school of thought hasn't permeated through the entire community. But anyway, scouting from the bottom up makes the most sense. I like the way you phrase it there. Like, how did you get here? That's a cool way to think about it. But it kind of feels like we're talking about one of your other points here from your infographic that I'm going to try and figure out how to post in the show notes. But like, what are the actual risks? So when you, Benmar, are like standing in the Stikine, ready to run Site Z for the first time, did you go through a like, what are the actual risks checklist? And then supplementary to that, where do you draw the line with what you just said about like at the time when you're going to lose that independence and someone else is going to have to start picking up after you?
Say that again.
Let's start with like actual risks. Like when you, Benmar, are scouting a rapid, like for example, like Stikine, Site Z, like first descent, did you stand there once you've done your bottom up scout and say, okay, what are the actual risks?
Yeah, that very specifically was hard for a bunch of reasons, including that was in 2012. So I have a lot more experience now. And yeah, that being a first descent, there was a few things that I couldn't come to a conclusion. And what I eventually, the things that stuck out a lot is in that rapid, there is a really shallow place that the white water above it is moving in that direction. You can't just sit there and go down. And now, 8 years later, however many times I've run it and other people have run it and we've seen what goes on, no one's gone over there. So I gave that place in the rapid, I gave it a lot of attention and I thought about it extensively and I looked at all the water going over there. And lots of people, myself included, depending on a situation, I won't tell, like visualizing is a very strong tool, but I encourage people to visualize not a negative outcome, but all potential outcomes and circumstances. So it's one thing to have a plan A and a plan B, but I like to have a bit of an idea of what I'm risking. So what do I do if I go over there? What's that going to feel like? Like what fear should I expect so it doesn't startle me? And what sensations, like what rocks and et cetera. And it's a really shitty area. Days later, the only thing that's gone over there is a creature craft, like days after I ran it. As far as I know, no one's actually been swept over there. Annuals hit some rocks close. I saw Tad Dennis go pretty close, but still being moved in the main current away from what I decided was the thing I was most scared about. And then the other thing I did was I thought very carefully about my first potential mistake. Like if it didn't go wrong from here, this is the earliest thing I was worried about. And I looked at everything, I watched the water, I was like, I don't think that I will drown. Like I'm pretty positive that like if that thing crunches me, I'm going to get crunched there. If I swim there, it's going to be awful. But I don't think that that will kill me. And that was part of my real risk assessment. And that would mean being separated from my boat, which would mean it'd be hard to get the boat, which would mean I'd have to hike out. So it was or call a freaking helicopter.
And for the situation we're talking about, of people who aren't familiar, Stikine River is a extremely remote canyoned-in river in northern British Columbia.
Yeah, and I'm not the like I could do it now probably a lot better than I could then, but I'm not the guy you drop off in the middle of nowhere and he's just like, hoorah, like I got this. Like realistically, me hiking out of a river, I'm not stoked on that. I like to.
And I mean, hiking out of that river in particular days, would be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's. And then another part of my decision was I came here to run this river in the classic 3 days that it takes people to run. I didn't come to cut it short in the start of day 2. But that's also a unique example because I just ended up really wanting to run that rapid, and I accepted those risks as real, and I was confident that in that situation it was not going to be like a drowning situation. And then on the devil's advocate of that, like every situation, like you can always drown.
And then my follow-up, like supplementary question was, we talked about like, you phrase it like loss of independence, but I phrase it like someone having to rescue you, or like the people you're with having to put themselves at risk to rescue you. How does your decision to run a rapid impacting them affect your decision making?
I like to. It's hard to step back that many years. The independence I feel now, and part of that is from like the times and the places where I've paddled alone. That's almost a way of testing certain things about your skill set. It can be. Other times it's just you just go. But sometimes you run something and you chat about the safety plan because people are there to support each other. So something going wrong doesn't mean I've lost my independence, as I put it. But I've also been in situations where I've realized on not a remote run, something like in Washington, where it was very nice feeling for me because I realized that I had a different level of comfort on the river or that river, and I could spread my awareness out to incorporate other people's safety. And I would realize that people are really at their limit of skill, and it's exciting. They're like sending it, and this is going to be a big experience for them, but they're not able to help other people in the group, and it felt good for me to unspoken just become part of the support system and just be behind them so I could see everything or stuff like that. And I don't like the idea of running something that I could change the whole situation of the day. Like the whole dynamic of the day because I did something loose. So I just try not to, like I can understand when I'm being loose. And it doesn't feel like a lot, but it's...
And so that kind of factors into like decision making. It's something like I think about personally, like if I'm looking for something that's at the edge of my bubble, the people I'm with factor into where the line of my bubble is almost. Not because it's like I can't run it, but it's like if I made one of those mistakes, the people I'm with either may not have the skills to, which is not their fault, they're just not experienced enough yet, or if I made a mistake, it might put them in a position where they're in much more danger trying to deal with me. And for me, I've been finding, I think that does factor into my decision-making process somewhat. Kind of like how you're just saying you're looking at it more from that like group experience point of view, like the experience you're having on the day.
Yeah.
And I wondered if that factored into your decision making for where the edge of your bubble is. If the people you're with affects the edge of your bubble.
Okay. Here's a better answer to. We've arrived at a better question. That you do that before you get on the river. So a lot of the kayaking that I do is with a small group and with people I've paddled with like extensively for a long time in hard whitewater. And then when that group changes, I do get uncomfortable, even if they're really good kayakers, because I don't want to deal with their shit. And because I have that attitude, I certainly don't want them having to deal with my shit, because like it just doesn't, it's not a great group cohesion. But in other situations, I feel like I can address that on the way to the river. And I've gotten better at it, but there's been times where I'm just like, okay, again, ego, it's like I'm supposed to be this person, and I'm going to be not. I'm going to ask people questions that it sucks to ask somebody a question where you're kind of basically asking them like how good you are, how experienced you are, how well you know the river, or how many times have you run it, or if I'm the one getting into a group. Another thing that can happen if you're the stronger paddler, or if you're assumed to be, or if you assume you are, and maybe you're right, and maybe you're not, but then asking questions about the river and because a lot of times people might just be like, oh, this guy's either thinks he's cool or thinks he's really good or is really good, and they might feel uncomfortable with saying, just so you know, there's a rapid that kind of snags people, or there's a rapid with a tricky move. Like, they might not want to say that. They might assume since you've run the river once, you remember. But all that is mitigated and accepted before you get to the river. So you have to either accept and then act accordingly, or not go to the river with certain people. So I've done that with...
That's kind of exactly what I wanted to unpick in this, kind of exactly how you just put it. And when I was younger, I've been thinking a lot about like how I used to paddle when I was younger recently, because I've been like digging through a lot of old hard drives for like old photos and finding all these like old video clips. And I remember this it's funny how like you'd see a picture and then you like remember feelings associated to it and stuff, or like memories from a day. And then you have like, you remember these like little extra moments you just completely like put to one side. But I remember when I was younger, having those exact discussions with people, and they'd have them with me, and I'd be like, this guy's such a dick. He's asking me if I can roll and stuff, and if I've done this run before. And I was like, but now that I'm older and more wrinkled, I realize that those discussions are so imperative that it's like the preemptive safety mechanism to not having a bad day, and you're having it in the car park or in the before you even get in a car to go somewhere.
Yeah. Before
you get there, and it's like such an underutilized tool, because I don't think people necessarily have the communication tools that they need to approach those conversations and be like, hey, have you been here before? Or if they're the person who hasn't been here before, how to approach that with groups of people they maybe are not super familiar with, or like Facebook friends with, but not, like haven't paddled very much with.
Yeah.
And I wish there was, maybe I'll try and think about putting together that toolkit of like those car park conversations, because they're so essential, like preemptive safety that is so often assumed and ignored. And it only takes two people to assume something, and their assumptions have to be just ever so slightly non-coherent, and then you've got a recipe for a really bad day.
Yeah, it's tough. It's really easy too if you just don't paddle like with certain people. And I almost said with beaters, but basically, like when I go to the river, I'm on my way with the people I'm on my way with, and the group doesn't change. And there's a lot of security in that. And sometimes in certain places things change, but like I typically am not around super busy rivers or rivers at their busiest. And the rivers I am around like that are kind of safe. Like I don't even like actually creek that much. I have discovered and happily now sit under my own created title of I like classic creek boating. Like I'm a classic creek boater. I don't want to go creeking on runs. I don't want to go creeking on. And Fisher did a good job at one point. I can't remember it all, but something that he would do and he encourages people to do is say you've just met some people, you're going kayaking. Like who here's done this run? Oh, you have. You all have. Cool. Who's done it the most? Oh, you have. How long is it? Like how many kilometers exactly? Oh, are there any portages? Whereabouts in the river is the portage? And if you have a curiosity about the river, you can't really go wrong. And then just saying something about yourself too. Like you can say, I've done this once. It was a while ago. I don't want you guys to think I know where I'm going, and I don't want any responsibility for like how fast are we going
that
to
like
go?
detachment of ego again, like kind of what we said right at the start.
And when I've had to do that, it's on like easy-ish runs. I'm trying to fit into the group, but also be honest. And there's other times I've had to like, dude, we could go to the Stikine, and I could be like, I don't know what you want. I can tell you that if I look like I'm online, I'm going to be online. If I'm moving pretty quick, I'm trying to get back online, and I can't tell you a breakdown of every single rapid before we get there, but I know that I'm going to remember it when I'm dropping in. There's other people who they'll just give you like, this is what's happening in the next 5K. I'm going to be like, we're going to be at a really big section, and until then, like, it's basically down the middle. But I'm not going to give like something super specific, and I don't want to grab every eddy. So understanding how you roll, and especially, like if you're with a group, it's just
preemptive safety.
Yeah.
I think that's the...
Yeah, and you're going to end up, it doesn't matter if it's in class 3, 4, or 5, you're going to end up paddling with people you don't know, but who you know through a friend or through online, and you'll know that you're capable, and even if they're kind of a friend, you might not have a dynamic with them that is super conducive to honest chat. I ran the Stikine one time with someone who'd run it once before, and I'd be like, this is Wicked Wanda, and he'd just like nod. I'm like, fuck, like of course he knows it's Wicked Wanda. Like, he's got a better memory than me. He's better at this than me. He's got a better map than me. I'd be like, okay, so this is like the Pacific. Yeah, he knows. But then he never said, I know, please stop. And at some stage to another guy, same trip, who I was just a little more comfortable with, I was like, do you want me to say these things? Do you want me to not say these things? Do you want that excitement of, I kind of remember, I kind of don't? Or, dude, people don't boat scout stuff like this all the time, like, but we can do it. Like, you don't need to hear shit. Like, we can just go down it. Like, what do you want for your experience? And it's just practice. Like, yeah, whatever, man. I've been kayaking for like 20 years and I'm 33, and I'm still practicing certain things. And a hard thing for me is going to be stopping to run really the hardest stuff I run, and then starting to run stuff with other people who aren't my like close shred buddies, and kind of learning how to communicate all that.
Yeah, I think the situation you're in is not typical for most kayakers who are in that position where you have the luxury of being like, these people are alone. And I think most people are not in a position where they can go, these people are alone, because they don't have necessarily the skills to back that up. Mm-hmm. Or the friend group to be like, to back that up. And it's difficult, I think, for most people to manage that, which is probably the reason that we're having this like fear management talk, because people aren't taking those preemptive safety steps of like talking about it before you get in a car to go drive somewhere. And now that's why we're looking at it like this.
Yeah.
The last thing, kind of, we've been picking through this little picture point by point. The last thing on there is breathing to slow your heart rate. And I have recently, or in the last year, been like more turned on to the power of breathing, what and obviously it was important enough for you to put on your Instagram story of fear management things to think about. Why is that?
Because there's a lot of reasons why your heart rate can go up, and you can do it sitting, or you can do it by interpreting something, or you can do it by thinking ahead about something. And I find, for me personally, that, and I haven't found the exact book that I know there's going to be a great one. I haven't dug too hard, but when my heart rate starts to increase, I find that my thoughts and they start turning faster, and that I become less clear. So this could be as simple, another just like classic example, something like Sight Z. This isn't a good example because I don't really, like, you can scout it from I don't even walk down there anymore, but like if you walk Sight Z, like, you're gonna elevate your heart rate. So if you walk around a bunch to scout, you're actually doing a lot of physical exercise. So it's good to just be able to separate your heart rate from your decision making, because your heart rate is elevated because you're using your legs and you're breathing heavy. If you're standing and taking in a rapid, this happened to me a lot on the Indus because I wasn't walking around a ton to scout because I could see a lot. I would slide my hand underneath my life jacket and put my hand over my heart, and I would just feel it and be like, damn, my heart's beating fast, or whatever. And I would just take some moments to breathe like deeply and just let it slow down before I would, start moving and have it bump up naturally. There's just tons of situations. Something like on the Little White Salmon, say you want to run Spirit and you just want one quick look, and you run there and you run back and you're in your boat. You're like, heart rate's up. Like, I'll probably wait a bit because kayaking can be very physical. A good other sport example I found a lot when I was downhill mountain biking. If I ran up the hill to try to do something again, my heart rate would be going, and I'd be like, it's going fast. I don't have the time to like sit here and calm down, but I'd be like, this is going fast because of physical exertion, and I just have to take my hands off the brakes right now. Like in kayaking, to make a move, you want that energy in the bank. So I would just like know the things that can elevate it and understand them. And if it is, that's another thing with fear, to understand like, why are you scared? Like, are you afraid because you don't know if you can do it, or are you afraid because you know you're about to go do it? Which, in that case, I hope you know that you can. But understanding what can lift up the heart rate, and then having your own tool to bring it back down into your own control. There's sometimes you can run rapids and just be like chill. I have a heart rate monitor now that I wear when I'm kayaking, and it's fun to look. It'll be really cool on the Stikine.
To see if you're one steady flat line for the whole day.
Yeah, because there's sections of the Stikine that, because I know I'm going to be excited to look at it on my phone after, I'm going to work harder to be calmer, which I think it'll just be a fun exercise and a really good tool. But even like this, like, I can get nervous just like trying to talk. Like I have it on, like this watch is dead right now, but it doesn't have to be a sporting situation. Like if you get nervous about something and it speeds up your thinking, you might not have access to your best self in that situation to say what you want to say, or to say it a certain way. It's just the things that you can use access as to monitor for decision making, or as a tool. Like if I don't want to run something now, it's a lot easier for me. It's like my ego is satisfied. Like, it's never satisfied because it's a hungry ego, but for the things that were important to me at certain times, like I've fed my ego without like getting too fucked up or like seriously injured for a long time. So it's just easier for me now. It's a nice feeling to not feel like I have much to prove, but I still can get very scared. But then that's another cool thing. Like on the Stikine, like the Site Z is a big decision, but the Hold at 8 Chicago is a huge decision for me because there's a stout line and a less stout line. And even there, I have to decide. It's not like the one line. It's like, and the other line's not a sneak line. But if I don't run the main line, I feel like I'm running the sneak line, and I think about it upstream, and I have to stop. Either I have to choose when I allow myself to think about it, and then I start monitoring these things and my chatter. And if I tell myself to shut up and just run the right line, does that feel really good? It feels good. I'm just going to do that. And it's just important, I think, to listen to those things. Like even some people, it'll be like a feeling. Other people, like they want to trust their gut. They're like, what do you mean trust your gut? You'll like this one. If I get to the Little White and it's raging high, like sometimes I'll just have to poo. And that's because my guts are clenching. Like you're contracting insides. Like you're like squeezing, you're getting scared. Like that's the thing. Sometimes it happens to me above Spirit because I know I'm going to run Spirit. I'm like, oh, man, this is so cool. It's just an indication from your body. And it doesn't always happen. I don't know if it happens at Site Z, but there's just like at the Midas Rapids it happens. It's hilarious. There's bombs all over that place for sure.
It's interesting that your body, when you're really listening, like it maybe is giving you more information than you think, more than just like I'm sore, I'm hurt. There's like a lot more going on. So we've kind of talked about some tools for breaking down like the logical part of fear. And to bring it back to my root question, and this might not be something that you have a ton of experience with because you're like Benny fucking Maher, you're like your bubble is big and you're pushing the edge all the time. But for people who feel like their bubble has closed in, I was talking to our mutual friend Logan about this over Christmas. We were like happened to see each other on this trip, and I was saying when I was younger, like 2011, 2012, 2013, I had this feeling where I was like unstoppably wanting to push myself and like push and push and push and push. It was like, oh, you get to Middle Palgine at 5 p.m. I'm like, okay, who wants to go? And I would always want to go and always want to go. And, luckily some like older, wiser heads with me were like, hey, we don't have time for this today. Like we got to take it out. We got to be, somewhere else or something else. And then I had a bit of a downtime where I like blew my knee out, and then coming back up in, I had a similar bubble where it was like more, maybe not as fast as that first like 2011, 12, 13 push of like more, but I had like a slower expansion of my bubble, if we're going to keep using that bubble terminology, so I like that. And then more recently, I haven't been feeling that feeling at all. I haven't been waking up, like getting out of bed and being like, oh, okay, yes, what am I going to push today? And I don't know if that's just because there's other things in my life now that I'm more interested in putting my energy into, or if it's just because I'm getting older and the shape of my kayaking bubble is changing, and that's just something I have to live with. Do you think for those people who are starting to feel like that, they're just woken up one day and their bubble's shrunk and they're suddenly like, I didn't used to feel this way. Do you think it's possible for those people to build their bubble back out? Or do you think that's it? It's only going in one direction now and that's the train they're on?
For some people, it certainly seems that way. I've someone who, when I speak to about the river here, the Ottawa River, there's things that I'm calloused to that I need to be more sensitive to, like the water temperature, and it's high and it moves fast. And I get confused when someone here with a lot of years and runs, they're saying things that to me I want to say, the water, like can you not read it anymore? Like you can't, what do you see? And what what do you see and what's different? But I think I'm typically good at getting into people's shoes and really trying to think, but that's why I don't get it. Other people have gone away and come back and done, like Scott Lindgren, going to the Stikine, going to the Indus, going to the Royal Gorge. Last year on the South Yuba, I was paddling like very comfortably and happily, like I was at my edge a lot with him last year, and it was really cool. And he's a lot older than me. That gives me encouragement. Some people are, like Felix Lamler, I've run the Midas Rapids with him a ton. He's done a lot of incredible things, but I know his mind is very different. How it looks for me, I can feel the bubble changing shape, not necessarily shrinking. There's things that I'm more comfortable doing and things that I'm less, and I look back and I try to figure out why. Like my body doesn't like 2 years ago, I ran Spirit every single time I went down the Little White, which was a lot in a 2-month period. The next year, I only ran it if it was above like 4.2 or 4.3 on the gauge. And this year I ran it twice, and I wish I hadn't. Like I can feel it. It doesn't feel good anymore. The whole river when it's low just doesn't, my body, there's things that I'm having to make a decision, like I'm not good enough to run that river sustainably at certain flows, and I don't know if I need to spend the time getting that. So now even more I'm drawn to big water, and that is somewhere where I can have low impact, high output, and build endurance, and still feed my ego, and not feel like my bubble's shrinking, because that's, for my personality, I think it'll get close to a certain point, and then I might be confusing to somebody, like, I don't get what you're not doing, and like, I get it. You don't have to. This isn't comfortable anymore. It's not feeding me. It doesn't give me what I want. That said, I think all of this, depending on how you think about things, you can think critically, figure out exactly what's changing, and then find a way to make adjustments if that's what you want.
I think that detachment is such a superpower that's underrated, but if you can detach and look back at yourself, like if I was able to look more critically at myself in the last 3 years and say, these are the areas where your bubble's changing shape, or maybe even shrinking, why is that? And then play back from there, and it's like, okay, well, I haven't run many big waterfalls in the last year. It's like, okay, but are you not running big waterfalls because you don't want to run big waterfalls, or because you haven't, they're like not available, or you're not seeking that out, or all these factors. And the more you can really pull yourself back from your ego, just separate from it for a minute, I think that's how people can find the edges of their bubble again, and then focus up on how they can push that bubble back out if that's something they want to do, or say, this is where the line is, and I'm cool with that, and I'm putting my energy into other areas of my bubble or other bubbles for your other life things. Because I think you and I have this like big bubble that's kayaking, and then the rest of our life is smaller bubbles. And for some people, kayaking is just like one medium-sized bubble in their like group of medium-sized bubbles, and it's not more overtaking. It hasn't pushed the other bubbles out yet.
Yeah.
And I wonder if there's a way that everyone can detach themselves and look. And this is more of a rhetorical question, I guess, like, because you might not know the answer. Well, maybe you do know the answer. I don't know. But I wonder if there was a way where we could get everyone who to like detach for a second and look at where their limits are and why their limits are there, and maybe like work backwards from where they are now for like a 3 or 5 year period or whatever. And there might be some defining moments that's like, actually, there's one thing or another that's the cause of that, or maybe it's more difficult to see the cause of that, and they're going to have to reflect on that a bit more carefully.
Yeah.
I don't know.
With waterfalls, I know if I wanted to get a certain amount of comfort with a goal in mind, I would, at this point, probably have to be pretty specific and use what I've learned in the past to train instead of just go for it, because the chance to get hurt is higher. And it's hard to understand. I've tried to make a point of never saying to someone like, "Oh, you just have to like live and then understand things relevant to your own body and your own mind." Like, I just have a different perspective, but the ego is a big part. Like, I don't have any thirst for like waterfalls anymore, and I had a pretty low, easily quenched thirst for my whole life, and I was pretty slow about it. But egotistically, I ran some drops that were important to me to experience that I don't need to have had run, but I'm happy I did. But I think yeah, if you just think about repetitions and training, you can probably do anything.
That's kind of how I've been looking at it. Like, I've been reflecting a lot, like I was saying, like on my younger self versus my now self, and like my younger self, I just realized had a lot of skill and not much experience. My older self has a lot of experience, and maybe my skills need more training. But now that I'm more experienced, I know how to train those areas. So when I want to be sharpened on something, I know how to sharpen that skill now. And it's not like, okay, sweet, I'm going to roll out of bed and go do a 100-footer tomorrow. But if my goal was that, which it's not, but if my goal was that, I know the steps I would take to get there now. Whereas before, it'd have been like, yeah, sweet, like, if you get to the bottom, when you get to the bottom, like, let's go. And I'm happy I have that experience, but I think I'm more happy that I see that detachment is a superpower that is really important. And maybe not everyone looks at detachment from their own ego, their own skill level, separating those two things out, and then really be able to backtrack. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Am I speaking logically?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably something you do when you get older. Think more. Backtrack.
Well, I mean, like right now we're all on lockdown, so I guess we've all got a lot more time to think more.
Yeah, but like I'm doing, yeah, I was on the Stikine one time with Aniol, and we were trying to decide what to do, to go again, to not go again. And he was like, "What's left, man? Like, I need a goal. I don't have a goal right now." And we're tired. So your goals change or you run out of them, and at some point being realistic with why you're doing, like, people go up to the Stikine for one trip. I went up there my first trip, did a 3-day trip and left. This doesn't even make sense to me anymore, but it's been a long time. Like, what I go up there to do is very different now. And I'm finding all these ways to experience different rivers in kayaking now that feed me, make me really happy, and also I am still like feeding my ego. It makes me feel like relevant. It makes me feel like I'm pushing an area that I hadn't pushed before.
If you could go back in time and tell 18-year-old Benny any of your knowledge about dealing with fear, any of the things we talked about, or anything else that we haven't talked about, you could go back in time and you could have a 2-minute conversation with 18-year-old Benny. What would you say? 18-year-old Benny. And it's difficult here, right?
I'd probably tell him to move to Whistler and work in a bar and not fall into the party hole, but to maybe go to Whistler and live there.
And what would you tell him, like, more specifically related to his fear management, kayaking skills? Because I think there's such a negative stigma attached with fear, and not enough people, in my opinion, think about fear management and like how they're dealing with controlling where their bubble is.
Yeah, I've always have liked what I've done, and I've had the right lessons at the right time. I ran Sunshine when I was really young, and I didn't want to. I caught an eddy. I was paddling with John Grace, my best friend, and someone else who I knew. No, I didn't know who. I was with John Grace. This is like a big deal for me. I was probably with Chris Grotmans and Max, maybe just Max. And our friend, who I didn't know very well, I saw him walking, and I was like, oh, I'm so jealous. Like, that looks so nice. just go walk. And
Yeah,
then
the
it's
walk
like,
there
no,
is not
I
bad
am
at all.
not. I am running it. And I just did the exact worst line you could do. And that was a really nice lesson that I didn't take on any injuries from. I had to go through like embarrassment about it, but it was a good lesson. And all the, like, no matter what, if I ever got caught up talking shit, which you do, I do still, or you can do, and it's easy to do when you're young, I still made decisions pretty much based around like what I was feeling and the skill, being realistic with like what I could do. And I don't know if it's, I don't know what you can say to like actually change how someone processes things or what happens inside their own head. But if I knew what to say to myself 15 years ago, if I could give a gift of letting that person just detach from creating situations inside my head and having conversations in my head, like even like creating a conversation with someone where I'm just trying to figure out what they're thinking without asking. That's what I would try to give them. Maybe that lesson is to, if you have a question, ask it instead of beating yourself up all the time. But sometimes it's not a question you can ask. Like, I give myself shit about food, like eating a certain way or drinking a certain amount, and it's just followed me my whole life. So it can be about a rapid, it can be about a decision that you made, but I've wasted time going back and forth in my own head. And if I could give that gift, just not caring about what people think, the ego thing is tough. I've definitely struggled more internally than externally with that.
I think most people do. They're not maybe prepared to admit it, and they're not like able to detach to admit that that's actually the battle they're facing, or they don't see that because of their ego. But I think a lot of more people than we realize are in that like daily boxing match with their ego, just trying to make it to the next round.
Yeah,
when they
I don't think you can't hack that either. Like, and if you could, you wouldn't really want to. The
well,
way
you need
that,
it, right? Like we talked about, like at the start, like
Yeah.
you kind of need it. Like as much as it's good to detach, and that's like the ultimate power is to step back and say, what am I doing and why, and what could go
Yeah.
wrong and why, and like what's actually going to happen and why. But you kind of also need that the other guy to be like, we got this. Like,
yeah,
let's go. Don't have time for this.
yeah, and there's things that just aren't worth changing. But if you look at the skills that someone who's 18 has now, they're like far, far better than what I would have been
Me too.
at 18.
Tons better.
But by the time I got to where maybe that level, it took a lot of experience to get there. So the experiences that you have, yeah, are cool. And some people don't even feel, like you can see it. Like, so I go kayaking with some people, and like, this is kind of cool. Like, I've kayaked with people where they're like, they need to be told. Like I have a friend who I paddled with on the North Fork, and I was just like, dude, you are going into situations that are far, like you're putting yourself at a risk that you can't seem to feel. And I've paddled with a guy on the Trust before that he's open about it. He's like, I'm not, like, I don't feel much fear. So he's willing. These are the people who don't swim. Like, you'll see them. They will not roll. It will take a long time sometimes, but they will roll, and it won't be something that they're thinking about at dinner. Like, it just doesn't hit them the same way. And then I can do that too with other friends where you paddle enough with someone. Like, when I'm with Aniel sometimes, I can almost see our fear meters. And I will just be shocked at how low his can be sometimes. And then other times I've been as equally startled to see all these signs of fear in Aniel. I'm like, wow, like, I don't know what is triggering him right now because I'm super chill. But it has to do with the terrain, the whitewater, and everything. And it's very rare that he's scared and I'm not, but it has happened. I've just been looking at him like, what is going on? So people just experience it differently too.
Do you
and
think
that's
that-
good to watch.
Do you think that's like an interesting, like a way you've been subconsciously detaching yourself is like looking at your like a video game, like your fear meter and Annual's fear meter at the same time, and that's like one of the ways you've been processing
Well, that's
fear
what
management? Or
yeah,
is that
like
just
I don't
a happy byproduct?
you just start to know things about people like I can Aniel and I spent a long time together on the Stikine, and that there's not a lot of communication happening, but there's a lot of body language and a lot of
A lot of looks.
pardon?
A lot of those looks. Like where you just make eye contact with someone and you know it.
Not even
You
that.
know all they're
It's-
thinking.
Well, it's like, yeah, knowing how long you might go without stopping, understanding what you're about to kayak through without looking at it, shouldering that responsibility of performing at your best to be a strong member of the group, knowing what's coming, and then seeing someone correct or scramble, and then watching and putting that information in the bank. Like, what would I have, if that had happened to me, would I have wanted to stop? Like, and knowing like when there's a need to slow, when there's not, like seeing someone catch an eddy, like, why are you in an eddy? And all that. And then I got to do it with Jared too, which is different with the three of us. And I think that's another just fun thing. The other thing with kayaking is you're going to get bored if you kayak a lot. And you find new ways to, that's what I used to run the Little White, and I could not be part of, the Little White's very continuous. I could not be part of taking care of other people, unspoken. Like, you do your head count, whatever, that was it. Someone new on the river, I couldn't be a part of it. Like, I can cover.
Preemptive safety, right? Like kind of what we talked about earlier.
It's like I'm not, like, this is, or
choice,
you have to say
choices
it.
that get made
Yeah.
before you even get to the river.
Yeah, you're with, this is your thing. We can all kind of be in the same thing, but that's your thing. Like, you're taking that person down. I've been with, sometimes on that river, I've been like, if I want to take someone down, like, I don't want to be part of a bigger group because I don't want that person's experience to get lost in the comfort of a bigger group where they need certain things. My first time going there, I was 19 the first time. The next time I went, it was right before the race. I got shown down once, and then the next 3 runs were terrifying. I just was trying to keep up, like, couldn't. Boat scouting, scary. And then it got to a point where it was like, I can help people get down that river, and it gives me more to do, and I want that. So that's another cool thing to look forward to, and just understand that if you paddle a shitload, you'll either start doing something else, or you'll find ways to occupy like the bandwidth that you free up.
Do you think there's anything we've left out of our top conversation on fear? And it's really turned into a topic of kind of ego detachment. I didn't see this conversation going that way, but it's been really interesting. Do you think there's anything
the
we
more
missed?
you can paddle with the same people, the better, because you'll get that comfort and be able to read, like, be able to understand without communicating. Because the river's
I think that can be a bit of a trap though too.
Well, it's like
I think that's in your situation that's worked out really well. I think for a lot of people, especially when they start kayaking, they want to kayak with a few people and they get into a bit of like a dependence hierarchy, like a bit of a Jenga tower, if you will. And maybe their brick is really dependent on someone else's brick being there, and when that other person is not at their best, or they're not having a good day, or they're sick, or they're just straight up not there, like, then the other parts of that Jenga tower can be very vulnerable.
Yeah, but if you spend a lot of time with one person, there's things that you'll learn and patterns that you'll see. Scouting, I hate scouting for people, but it works. When someone scouts for me, I really hate that too. But there's certain people that it's okay. But you also have to be, I think you have to be very submissive. Like submissive and get out of your boat and scout it. And if that's a problem for somebody, why? Like, are you actually running out of daylight or what? Like, it's just slowing it down. Like, maybe that's not someone you should be paddling with. Scout your own shit. Because you don't want to fuck up. basically. So sometimes I just have to scout for myself. Sometimes I can submit. And there's a river I ran this year where I was with one other person. I'd run the river once by myself. It was properly high. And I just said, like, for this to work, like, I'm going to do all the scouting. And I will always either say if this is like a portage, or I'm going to be looking for the easiest way down because we need to get off of the river. And that person who's absolute beast, like, we had an understanding and submitted to that, and I just led, and it worked, and we got off the river. And it was sick, but it was gnarly. And I did 2 kilometers extra of movement on the banks, running around, scouting everything. I checked on my track and all. Yeah.
I think scouting for other people is a bit of a hot button issue in that
it can be fun too.
It's something that, like, once you're a fairly experienced kayaker, becomes quite a normal part of your, like, group flow, especially on, you know, when you haven't been to a place before. It's like, or you're doing a first ascent, like, it might not be appropriate for every single person. Maybe not even every single person can get out of their boat to go check it out.
Really?
But I also think that it's something that doesn't get practiced very much, because when you start kayaking, it doesn't happen as much. You know what I mean? Like, there's not a very good intermediary step building block from, like, everyone scouts everything to, like, one person scouts for the group.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a skill to it too. I was with Sven, and I'll run anything that he, like Aniol, I will follow him down anything.
Yeah, there's a handful
Within
of people
reason.
who are like,
it's just,
if they say left, right, left, I'm like,
yeah,
let's go.
I'll follow you. If he's just boat scouting something, like, he has this freak way of doing it really well. Sven, just the way he communicates, there's zero bullshit, and it's very understanding to me.
Billy from Quebec Connection is my favorite.
Billy's great.
He's my favorite guy to paddle with in Quebec, actually.
He's who, on the Stikine,
he will eddy out and be like, left, right, you see a rock like this, and then you go right again, then we are done. I'm like, okay, and he might have just described 2 miles of whitewater to you, and you're like...
Yeah. On the Stikine one day, he said, we're like 2 corners above Wicked Wanda, right? And I was like, I don't know, man. I'm embarrassed to say I have no clue. Wicked Wanda is the next big rapid that we run. That's all I know. And Sven's really good because it's probably just the way his brain works. English is second language, or maybe third, and he just says the right things for me. He'll just say, this is fucking easy. Or he'll say, this is class 5, and I'll know, like, this is critical. Because if Sven is saying it's, like, he's using the spectrum properly, or the rating system properly. He's come back to me, he's like, class 3. And I'm just, it either brings me to a level of focus or a level of comfort. And that, for how I like to run whitewater, that's more what I need than description. Unless, of course, the...
You ever paddle with Clay Wright?
No.
Great guy to freestyle paddle with. I don't really enjoy going creeking with him. I've done it 2 times probably. He's a really great guy, but his explanations for things are...
Too detailed?
100 times more detailed than I like. I need to know, like, left, right, or middle, and if there's any, like, significant things to go towards or avoid.
Yeah.
And I just can't do it anymore. He's on my, like, he's on my list. So, like, I love the guy. I freestyle with him all day long, but I don't know that I can do that much creaking with him.
Yeah.
And keep my sanity.
It's a hard thing to do, and to then cater it to other people. I've gone down whitewater before where Evan scouted something, and I was listening to him, and I was just, like, nodding my head. I couldn't really hear what he was saying, but I thought I had a good idea. And I started going, and I saw him just throw his hands up in the air, like, what are you doing? And I thought, oh no. And it turned out fine because I was in the right boat for a big boof, but it's a skill on both ends. And then again, like, if it's always the kayaker's independent decision to get into the flow and past the point of no return. Like, you can always get out and scout. You can always get out and walk. And if you're on a river where those things aren't possible, you can learn that beforehand. And if it's a first descent, like you can research that, and you should have a pretty good idea.
I mean,
of what
realistically,
you're doing.
most people who are going to do who are like interested in doing first descents probably have some kind of grounding. And you know, I hope. I hope.
Yeah, but
I
you
hope.
you can end up in that situation, but you can know why you ended up in that situation. Being able to, at the bare minimum, understand current, locate an eddy, and get out of your boat, like it's kind of what you need to do.
I'd hope that's the base that most people want. Benny, I think this has been quite informative for people to really take a hard look at themselves and detach more and think more critically about what their actions and why, and their heart rate and why, and what their body's telling them and why. And I think that's the skill that's not used enough. And I think, to come back to my introduction of my friend who was saying that they have been feeling more fear recently on things which I know well within their skill level, I suspect that they need to detach more and think more critically about what they're doing and why they're doing it and why they feel the way they feel.
Yeah.
And then my hope is that they will look at where they want to end up and then make a plan, work backwards from there to where they are now, and train and push the edge of their bubble back. Push that bubble out, get it away from your bubble.
Zoom out.
Yeah, way out. Benny, is there anything you've got left to add to this episode here?
No, this is great. Welcome to the Benny fucking Marr Show, episode 1. Thanks, Seth, for recording that.
And that is all I've got for questions and thoughts about this week. I will see you in a future episode, and look out for the Benny fucking Marr Show on podcast apps near you sometime between now and 2025.
Yeah.
I hope.
That sounds good.
Okay.
That's a reasonable timeline.
Peace. Thanks a lot for listening, guys. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you are interested in supporting, don't forget, check out patreon.com/Seth Ashworth. Have a great day.